Hello and welcome to the next chapter in the XNA Xtreme 101 class. In this chapter, we're going to be creating the game Precision. Now, Precision is a Windows-based XNA game, and it's going to be the largest game we have written yet in the XNA Xtreme class. Now, before we get started creating Precision, let's spend just a minute and provide a quick, generalized overview of everything that's going to take place in this section. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start out with a requirements plan. Requirements plan is very important. This is where we're going to go in and we're just going to provide a very generalized overview of the game Precision. That's all. No code, no thinking about, not even rules, just a very basic idea of what the game needs to do. From there, we're going to take our requirements and we're going to move into the design phase. It's in the design phase where we're going to say, okay, here's what we need the game to accomplish. Now, how are we going to get there? What are the game rules going to be? How does the enemies move? How does the player move? How do the enemies and the player interact with one another? How many lives do you get? How does the score work? Etc., etc. Once we have all of that figured out and documented, we're then going to move from the design phase into the implementation plan. Because keep in mind, in the design phase, we're not thinking about code. We're not thinking about code at all. We're basically designing our game in documentation form. Once we move into the implementation plan, this is where we take what we've come up with in the design phase and we begin implementing a plan that we can follow when coding out the game. So once we have an implementation plan in place, we will then proceed to coding and we'll begin coding it. Now, this is a very important thing to understand. Precision is large. It is a very large project. And because of that, we're not going to provide the entire implementation plan at one time. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a very generalized implementation plan, and then we're going to provide you with a lot of breakdown implementation plans. Let me see if I can draw some diagrams to help illustrate what I'm talking about. Let's pretend this is an implementation plan. You like that, huh, Logan?
Yeah, very, very accurate. It's almost as good as one of those cloud things.
And it kind of looks like some of our implementation plans that we have floating around here. And from this, what do? We generate code. So here's the code that's generated from our implementation plan. Well, since Precision is so large, if we were to provide the implementation plan in one video, this is what it would look like. You like sound effects too, don't you? And hang on. I know, guys, you're thinking, all right, that's enough. But no, I'm really trying to drive the point here. This is what the implementation plan would look like. Okay, so that would be the implementation plan. And notice how we're going back in here and we're adding a little bit here and there, because that's probably how it would be. And we'd say, there's the implementation plan for Precision. Now let's take this guy and turn him into code. All right, so now we can start following the implementation plan and we begin coding and we code a little bit here. Then we've got to jump into a class over here, which then has a piece of code up here affecting it. And then we begin another class and some more code and something needs to go here. Well, what ends up happening? The big picture gets lost. What's the saying, Logan? Can't see the forest for the trees?
Yeah, you can't see the forest for all the trees.
Exactly. So here's our forest. But what ends up taking place is we're somewhere in here and we've lost sight of the big picture, and we really want to keep the big picture in mind at all times as we're working our way through Precision. That will make the educational experience of this particular section of the XNA Xtreme class so much more valuable, because if you lose sight of what's taken place, then the rest of the videos putting Precision together will more or less be meaningless. And we don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to break the implementation plan and coding phase down into smaller steps. Like I said, we're going to provide a very generalized implementation plan talking about how we're going to approach the entire thing. But we're then not going to begin coding. So you can kind of think, that's not going to happen next. What happens next is we're then going to say, okay, implementation plan for the first part. This is what we want to have happen, and we're going to present a very structured, easy to manage implementation plan. From there, we're going to turn around in the next video and we're going to code it. It'll be very easy to keep all of the objectives in mind because we just provided a very simple implementation plan for what we need coded. Once we have the code written, what are we going to do? we're going to turn right around and we're going to provide another implementation plan that's going to build on the last implementation plan. So we'll say, all right, now we need to continue with precision by adding the following functionality, which will then turn around and code. And we will continue to repeat this process over and over and over until the game is finally complete. So I'll just draw one more, even though there's going to be something like 12 or 13, I think it's 13 different implementation plans and coding phases that we're going to go through. Of course, that number may change as we work our way through this. But think of it like this. We're going to start out with a foundation for precision, the very first implementation plan, so right here. And as we progress through each of these implementation phases, we're going to end up with a completed game. But here's the beauty behind it all. The beauty is this. You're able to keep the big picture in mind at all times. You don't lose sight of the objectives when you're inside of any video. And that's really, really important. So once we've worked our way from foundation to game completion, of course, at that point, we need to progress into the testing, the debugging phase. Basically, we need to make sure that everything works properly, and we need to verify that the game that we have coded based off of our implementation plan, which was based off of our design plan, meets the original requirements of the game itself. And if we've accomplished that, then we've coded precision the way we wanted the game to be. So that is the objectives of this section of the XNA Xtreme class. We've got a lot of coding ahead of us. Now, we're still going to keep things as simple as possible. That's just going to help making it easy to understand how we're having all of the different classes communicate back and forth between each other without going outside of the realm of anything that has been provided to you in our theory lessons. Trust me, there are things that Logan wanted to use, such as delegates, in this particular project that we just couldn't do yet. We've got to work our way up to that. So we're going to try to keep this, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to try. We are going to keep this inside the constraints we've laid down. Basically, everything we've shown you is what we're going to use for putting precision together. No magic rabbits being pulled out of hats today. So with that, Logan, is there anything else you want to add to this?
Nothing comes to mind.
Okay.
I think that's a good breakdown of the approach that we're taking, that the implementation plans will be incremental rather than being presented all at once.
Exactly. All right, well, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and jump over to the next video, which will be a very quick one, where we're going to talk about the requirements of precision. Let's go ahead and get started.